When I was growing up, The Lord of the Rings was everything and everywhere. I remember going to see each movie as it came out with my mom and then reenacting them on the playground with my friends. I was always Gimli, though these days I'd probably have chosen Éomer or Prince Imrahil if I had read the books. I had the movie posters on my walls, I read The Hobbit cover to cover, the trilogy being a bit too ambitious for a 9-year-old, and of course, as an avid lifelong gamer, I played the many great games that came out in the wake of the film's monumental success. There were the, for me, PlayStation 2 co-op Legends, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and Return of the King, which I lost hundreds of hours of sleep with friends who I still chat about it with years later. There was the rather impressive Final Fantasy-inspired The Third Age, which I still own a copy of, and even for its faults, replay every so often. There was Battle for Middle-earth 1 and 2, still some of the best real-time strategy games ever made, even though they're hard to find these days. LEGO Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, Shadow of Mordor and War, War in the North, and Lord of the Rings Online. Truly, for about a decade and a half, we Lord of the Rings fans were spoiled for quality and quantity, and I look back on many of those games very fondly. I have read the trilogy 5 times since cover to cover, and I even have a tattoo of Narsil on my shin. The series means a lot to me. So naturally, as the years have gone by, as they tend to do, I, as you likely have, noticed a pretty sharp decline in games for Lord of the Rings, a franchise that, while it has gotten a lot of older coverage, I still think has plenty of untapped potential. Potential I believe is being realized in the online modding community. I've been a PC gamer for a long time, and have had the privilege of playing many fantastic mods and experiencing the world I love from the perspective of fans for years. There's one mod in particular I want to talk about today, but before I do that, I do want to highlight one honorable mention, because while this video says my favorite in 2025, I've been a fan of this series for over 20 years and its mods, and as such, there's an older favorite who deserves a second of our time. This is also not to say there aren't other really great mods for games like Total War that I could mention, which has legends like Divide and Conquer and Third Age Reforged for Medieval 2, both of which I've played a ton of in the past, but I haven't revisited as much, so I didn't want to put them here. The mod I want to talk about first is The Last Days of the Third Age, which is a Lord of the Rings total conversion mod for Mount & Blade Warband, a mod where players assume the role of an individual belonging to one of 18 factions on the side of good or evil, from Gondor to Mordor. But unlike most total conversion mods or even base Warband, Last Days of the Third Age is an action-focused mod. There's no diplomacy, no feasts, no tournaments. Instead, the main goal, the only goal really, is to destroy and win against the opposing side. And it's a blast, making for faster campaigns that feel like they have genuine stakes. While the combat system remains mostly intact from Warband, there are a plethora of new enemies, weapons, and armor to battle with and against. Likewise, the location of these battles, beautifully rendered and dramatically scaled, are all given unparalleled levels of love and attention. There's nothing quite like sieging Minas Morgul or the Black Gates for the first time, or defending Helm's Deep against hordes of Uruk-hai. This mod has stuck with me pretty much since it came out over a decade ago. I literally just replayed it like 2 months ago, so this footage is all mine, and it's still just as exciting, just as engrossing, and just as rich as I remember it, with the added caveat that Warband is kinda old these days, and it feels much older in a post-Bannerlord world, even if Bannerlord is still in many ways its inferior, but that's another video entirely. Today's mod is one for a game I cover a lot here on the channel, Crusader Kings 3, and while it could be easy to assume I mention it purely for selfish reasons, I want to stress that I truly believe the Paradox modding community is one of the best in all of gaming, and has some of the most talented modders I have ever had the pleasure to meet and play their mods. Since 2020, this mod has been blowing me away, and the stories you are able to create and participate in, the attention to lore and detail, and the writing of the different narratives, plus the ahistorical or non-lore shenanigans you can get up to, are all simply too much fun. What other mod lets you play through entire long-stretching storylines of minor factions like the Goblins of Moria, the Pirates of Umbar, or the Golden Easterlings? You can, of course, play as factions like Mordor, Rohan, and Gondor, but you can also play as the Shire, where you can whittle away the hours building up your economy, or create a hilarious powerhouse of Hobbit fury. I speak, of course, of Lord of the Rings, Realms in Exile, and I'd like to take about 10 to 20 minutes to go through the mod and show you the attention to detail firsthand so you can get a sense of it and hopefully give it a shot for yourself. As always, leave a like or comment if you've enjoyed the video so far. I'm Soul Tomato, and let's dive in. When I make videos for mods like this, I typically like to show you guys the title screen, which you can expect to see when you download the mod for the first time, which, by the way, the mod is available on Steam. There are 2 versions of it. Normally I use the open beta version because that's the one that's updated first. It'll be maybe slightly buggier. I've never had a problem with it, but if you do have an issue, that could be why. The other version is just not updated as frequently. So the first time you're obviously going to have continue if you have already played the mod or played like a Crusader Kings game before. I have many times, so of course it's going to be on there. You have new game, load, all that other stuff. So going into new game, there's a bunch of different bookmarks that you can choose and a bunch of different characters that you can play as. It can be kind of overwhelming as a first time player to look through this and of course be a little bit confused. There are 2 current starts, like areas that you can do. You can do the Third Age 2754, which takes place during the reign of Helm Hammerhand. Mordor is still ruled by one of the Nazgul, and you have Steward Baron, a couple things like that. It's a couple hundred years before the War of the Ring, if you were wanting to play something that's maybe a little less stressful. So the thing with the War of the Ring is that there is always this weight sort of like hanging over you of the coming doom of Sauron. So, you know, if that's something that you worry about as a player, like maybe you're new to Crusader Kings and you're trying to give this mod a try for the first time, try the 2754. And for my purposes, though, I'm going to use the Great Battle or the War of the Ring bookmark, and we're going to talk about this from here. A lot of really great and important characters here. We obviously have Denethor, we have Sauron, we have Theoden, we have Saruman. And what I want to do now is I want to just jump into the mod physically. There's also a couple other places that are a little less canonical. They go further south, like below the Dune Sea, below Harad. And a lot of that stuff is added by some notes, speculation, fans, other games, a bunch of stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff that you'll see down here, pretty much from the Gathering Storm downward, is kind of not lore accurate. So if that's something that bothers you, you don't have to play down there, but there's a huge part of the map that does constitute that. For my part, I'm going to start off as Saruman because I want you to be able to see his starting story beat. A lot of characters have really great story arcs that you can play through, and they're really, really well written, really, really fun to do. You can sort of like mix and match and do a lot of things. Like you could technically have Saruman turn against Sauron, or you can have him stay like loyal to him, or you can try to have him break free of that. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with this, and I want to show you that today. So we're just gonna hit start. We're gonna jump in here, and we'll hop around from different characters, but I just want you to be able to see the starting, I guess, story narrative beat. And when you load in for the first time, it's gonna obviously be zoomed in on where you are. As you can see, we're at Orthanc, and you can see it's beautifully rendered here on the map. It has a bunch of unique building descriptions and different things that the buildings will have, of course, because that makes sense. As we zoom out, you'll be able to see the entirety of the map that is available for you to play, which actually you can play all the way to Valinor. I don't know why you would, because there's nothing you can really do over there, but you also have this lovely rendered Gondorian table, little castles, a dagger, just like some added bonus details to the world that if you happen to zoom out, you can see. Of course, most of the time you're going to be zoomed in, so you're not going to see this. Like I was saying in the intro, pretty much everything below the Dune Sea, like here down, isn't necessarily canon, I don't think. It is on the map, I'm pretty sure, but most of this stuff is just stuff added by other games, by the players, by other mods, and it's fun to play down here for sure, especially if you're playing in the 2754, I think is what it was, Third Age start, because then you don't really have to worry about anything going on up here. You can kind of just do whatever you want. If you're playing as like a landless character and you want to like wander the entire length of the map, which I've kind of done before. I've started all the way up here in, if we want to zoom in so you guys can see it, we've started all the way up here in Erebor, gone all the way over here to these mountains where you can see the Firebeards, I think the Flamebeards, Yuri's folk. Then we've gone up here, and then I've come all the way down to one of the other dwarf peoples that live down here, Thrar's folk, and the mansions of Thrar, way, 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 way down the map. So there's like a lot of wandering and like cool adventures that you can go on, of course, but you don't have to do that either. If you want to just play the historical, or I mean, you know, the lore, War of the Ring, you can absolutely do that too. So when we start the game for the first time, I'm going to hit go really quick so that you can see the pop-up, but Saruman has probably one of the best story arcs, and I think that's one of the big highlights of this mod that I want to talk about. There's another great character up here, Maglor. If you're familiar with the lore of Lord of the Rings, he is one of the sons of Feanor. He has come back, and you can do a really, really fantastic story arc with him if you happen to manage to come down here and help Gondor defeat Mordor, which I have done in a video. I'll show you that's right here on the screen. It's a really, really fun. He's one of the more popular, definitely one of like a fan favorite character for sure. There's also a really great character up here, who's Margaux, who I believe is the last, I want to say it's called like the Dragon Emperor of this area, and he has a really sick story arc. There's also a guy in the other bookmark named Bountig, who's also good. I've made videos for both of those. There's a really fantastic Black Numenorian character. These guys technically worship Melkor, which is super cool. They are against Sauron as well, so you can kind of create your own alternative evil empire down here, and they kind of start off by themselves and have insanely powerful men-at-arms, which I actually don't see. That might have been taken out too because they were kind of overpowered, so if that's the case, that would make sense. But as far as Saruman goes, if we hit go, you'll see that we get the Lord of Isengard, and you get to get some of the background information, you know, about why he has been ruling Isengard for the last 240 years. And then you get the next pop-up, which will begin his story arc. You get to basically decide what you want to do with him. I must find the One Ring and bring order to Middle-earth, and then you can kind of just go from there. And his story arc is pretty long. It goes all the way from basically you potentially taking over the Riddermark, potentially going further than that, and then having a final showdown with Mordor, or like, you know, bending to Mordor's will and sort of just going from there. I don't want to spoil too much of that if you do decide to play the mod. I just want to encourage you to look at that and to try it out. Something that I like to do now when I make one of these is I like to go into observe mode so that you can sort of see the attention to detail on the map itself. So you definitely saw this in the intro. You could see Minas Tirith right here, this absolutely beautiful model based off of the one in the movie, of course. and it looks really fantastic, even up close, which is an impressive feature for a Crusader Kings mod because a lot of the times they won't. And if you click on the character and we go to this throne room, you can see that even the throne room of Minas Tirith has been rendered, although he does not sit in the steward's seat, which is kind of annoying. I do wish that it had the stairs and that he sat in this chair instead, and that Aragorn would sit over here. Aragorn is also in the mod. You can play as him. I believe he is, at the moment, up here with the Dunedain, and it takes a little bit for his story to get going. If I remember right, you got to wait like 10 years in game. I don't know if that's changed. I've done a video on him as well, which again, popping up on the screen. And it's a lot of fun because you'll come down, you become the King of Gondor, and you can also try to restore Arnor if you so wish, which is a lot of fun. And obviously you have, you can take on Sauron, who you can also play as, like I said, and he looks fantastic. He unfortunately does not have a unique throne room yet, which I wish he did. It's kind of funny looking at all of the Nazgul and orcs just in this normal looking room. The only other unique throne room that I can think of off the top of my head, there might be others, but would be the one here in Erebor, which looks unbelievable for the dwarves. It is so beautiful. This is obviously Dane Ironfoot, who you again can play as up here in the War of the North, which will of course happen. You have Dale, you have Durin's folk up here, you have Dorwinion, you have the Medloshikon or the Easterlings. I love playing as the Easterlings. They're honestly one of my favorite ones to play as. There's some cool elves up here as well. Of course, you can play as the Wood Elves. But again, going back, so you can see, you can't really tell, but this is Moria. It looks a little funky, but you can play in here as well. I think, if I'm not mistaken, at this point, Balin is still alive. He also has a really interesting story arc where you can actually restore Moria. And he can either survive or die. Most of the time, he'll die. It's a pretty hard start. You also do have to contend with the Balrog. Basically, if it's awake, because there's too much activity, it can randomly destroy one of your provinces. It can randomly just come to attack you. There's also a character who can kill it. Glorfindel is in the mod, and when playing as Aragorn, you can actually go through Moria with Glorfindel and destroy it, which is really cool, which I love quite a lot. Obviously, you have things like Edoras here on the map. Again, beautifully rendered. I love how Mordor looks. I always love showing it off when I do of course, I didn't even zoom in on it, but I always love showing off Barad-dûr when I do one of these kind of videos in Mount Doom because they look so great, and as does the Black Gate over here. But even places where, you maybe wouldn't think, Umbar has a beautiful port that's really lovely. The Shire looks nice and peaceful as it should. Hobbiton is quite lovely. Obviously, you have Buckland over here. I don't believe that you have actual, Bag End on the map, so you're not gonna be able to see it on here. It would just be somewhere in here, like on Bagshot Row is where he lives. You have great areas like you have Dol Amroth, which has their lovely tower. You have the huge city of, I believe Peligir is now on the map over here. Yeah, Peligir is right here. Really, really wonderfully done. And there's just a lot of attention to detail of the map itself. Like obviously, if I zoom out, you can see how nice the map painting looks in general. We can also obviously come over here to Valinor, which I don't believe is as tended to, but you do have this lovely elven city, which looks fantastic. It looks a lot like Gondolin, like how as I've seen on art. Or if we come over here to Lothlorien, you can see the golden, the golden trees. And what's interesting is that obviously if you play as like an elf, for example, we'll just jump over here and we'll play as Galadriel for a second. If you play as an elf, they don't obviously get as many levies or anything, and they don't get as many men-at-arms, but their men-at-arms are incredibly strong, and that's sort of their counterpoint, whereas somebody like, we'll say, these guys, they get way more men-at-arms, but they're much weaker. So that's sort of like the counterpoint. Obviously, you can also work as Galadriel, getting rid of Dol Guldur, which is kind of like one of her story arcs, which is interesting. Dol Guldur also kind of gets their own little one where they're trying to take over this area for Sauron. With that character I was talking about, who's Margot's, this guy, you can, during his story arc, try to break the Easterlings free from Mordor, which is something that I think is really cool. It's obviously not like canonical or anything like normally you would go and fight Gondor on behalf of Sauron, but you can try to overthrow it. It is really hard to beat Sauron. He's sort of like a boss fight. I mean, if you're experienced with the game, it's not so difficult. Obviously, you also have characters like the Witch King, but fighting against Sauron, even as Gondor, even at full strength, even with Rohan in tow, he's sort of like a mini boss battle character, which I think is really fun. He doesn't have the ring. I believe the ring is still being added, and for those of you who are curious, the Fellowship isn't really in the mod yet. That's still something that they're working on, because there's a lot of things to factor in how they would basically program something like that, because there's like a lot of story beats that you could hit or not hit depending on what happens, not only with your choices but just with the game itself. Like if there's a disease that breaks out and everybody dies, it's kind of something that you would have to account for. And then obviously we have all of this area down here, and this stuff is a little less, like I said, it's a little less canonical. It's a little bit more player focused, a little bit more like the mod developers wanting to sort of like test the limits of the lore and of, you know, other games and other knowledge, and kind of just like make an area, like a playground within this world that you can play in, which I think is really cool. I don't have as much to say on for places down here, only because of, you know, it isn't canonical a lot of the time, and I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy that aspect. Like there is arguably half of the map is stuff that probably isn't canon, but then you also have stuff like Harad is up here, and there's like a lot of great factions that you can play as that you don't really get to play as in other games. And I think besides the story and besides the attention to detail of the map itself, the big thing that I love is that you can just play as really anybody you want. I really like the ability to play as the Dunlendings if I wanted to, and sort of like assist Saruman with taking over the Riddermark, you know, sort of as like revenge against them, or maybe even turning against him if I so wish. I like the idea that I can play as the Bjornings and sort of like deal with the goblins that are coming down from the hills and maybe eradicate Goblin Town, which you can also play as, and he has a fun story arc too if you want to. I had a video where I actually destroyed Erebor and took it for myself as the Goblin King, which I think is really fun. There are unique people that you've probably never heard of. You can play as Gundabad way up here. You can play Gorgol the Proud, and they have a really, really sick looking fortress up here. There's also a mechanic in the game where you can reestablish old places and colonize them. And as you can see right here, we have the old seat of Angmar. So if you wanted to, you could technically restore the realm of the Witch King, which if you do win the war as Sauron, the Witch King does get the option to return to Arnor and sort of like try to reestablish their realm on behalf of Sauron, which is cool. Or again, like I said, if you play as Aragorn, who's up here, you can come down to Gondor, defeat Mordor and the war, and then sort of work on restoring Arnor as well, which it does take a while because there's obviously a ton of land up here. But if you look at the canon Empire titles, like this is what Arnor looks like, or what it's supposed to look like, this is what it actually looks like. Most of the stuff has fallen to ruin, to shadow, as you know from the book. You know, if you've read it or you're familiar with it, most of this is just wilderness, wild, and sort of unregulated at this point, because it would be. But you could also play as just somebody like Bree. You could play as the Butterman. You could just do a tall campaign where you're just like, I don't even care about what's going on out here. I really want to just sell my beer, or I want to do whatever. Or you could play as a Hobbit who wants to wander around and just find the best, you know, I don't know, Longbottom Leaf or something. A lot of that does have to be your own like driven narrative when it's stuff like that. But there's plenty of story characters for you to be able to explore. And just for the sake of it, I do want to jump in here really quick, because if you come over here to Lord Freca, I want to kind of give you an example of like what one of these story things looks like, because when you start as him, you will end up playing as his son Wulf, and this is the basis of that Lord of the Rings movie that came out not that long ago, the animated one. And I kind of just want to show you, like as an example to close this video out, like what one of these stories look like, so that you can kind of get a sense for it, and then decide if you want to try out the mod. So let's just read the words. Freca, Lord of the Westmarch and the Adorn, is a man of mixed heritage, claiming descent from King Freowine of Rohan. Freca is also the kin to the Dunlendings, which the Rohirrim have long feuded with. Though theoretically a vassal of King Helm, he has long ignored the royal summons and decrees of his titular overlord. For Freca has grown both rich and powerful, but King Helm is growing old, and Freca's heir is in the prime of his youth, and so a scheme is born. Helm has an unwed daughter, and surely he cannot refuse Freca's aid. His great troubles. And so again, loading in the game for the first time, the story is not going to start until you hit go, so I'm going to hit go. Lord of the Adorn, as I gaze out across my lands, I see the river Adorn winding its way through the fertile vale that share its name, its waters feeding the fields and pastures that sustain my people. Its currents carry more than life. A modest flow of trade passes down the river to the Eisen, bridging the needs of both the Dunlendings and Rohirrim alike. Though it wasn't always the case, wealth grows here, slowly but surely, as steady as the river's course. My hall stands strong, and my men grow loyal. Few among them would dare call me a vassal, though Helm yet names me so. I see no master here. Only a man whose grip on the Riddermark is firm but not unshakable. My son Wulf walks tall at 24 years of age, with fire in his heart and the will to claim what is ours by right. The blood of kings flows in our veins, though some would call it thin. But how long will the golden hall of Edoras let us stand unchallenged? Time is near. I feel it. The time will come to test my mettle. And then we'll just wait a bit, because the next story arc will pop up right now. Summoned by the king, not for the first time, a messenger from Edoras stands before me, bearing news once more of the king's council, a chance for King Helm of the Riddermark to gather his lords and to play at being the mighty master he deems himself. Yet I am no mere vassal to be summoned like a hound. He may not choose to believe it, but in my blood flows the blood of King Freowine, and my hold on the lands of the Adorn grows ever stronger. But long has Helm stewed over my past refusals, and his wrath is no small thing, even for one such as I. Another refusal may push him to at last act. If I am to go, I need not go humbly. Perhaps the time has come to show the strength of my position and secure the succession of Wulf, my one and only son. Travel with a host to show my strength is what I'm going to do. And so we're off. So unfortunately, my son Wulf, along the way, I cut it out, but he gained pneumonia. You can get rid of it. Hopefully our physician can cure him, but this could be an interesting run if you were to play this. So we've arrived in Edoras from our journeys. The proposal to climb to Meduseld is steep, but my men and I ascend with purpose. As we step into the Golden Hall, light from the torches dances upon the tapestries of King's Long Pass, and I fix my eyes only on Helm, seated high and grim. His council falls silent at our intrusion. King Helm, I call, my voice ringing out. I see you hold your councils without me. Strange for a lord of my standing to be excluded when you went to such lengths to call me here. I smirk, letting the insult linger before continuing. But perhaps this is not the only poor judgment you have shown of late. I step forward, my son Wulf standing at my side. They say you would sell your daughter Hera to a Gondorian noble, and against her wishes no less. Is this how you protect your own, by making us vassals to Gondor's whims? I gesture grandly, spreading my arms. I offer you a better path. Let her marry my son Wulf. Let us heal the divisions in our lands and forge a bond of strength. Or are you too proud to see sense? Well, what say you? Breaking point. Helm's eyes blaze with fury, but he masters himself after his nephew Freyleif lays a claiming hand on his arm. The marriage of your son is a trifle. You and I shall discuss it later. For now, this council is matters of the moment to discuss. When the council at last ends, Helm rises and places his hand upon my shoulder. The king does not permit brawls in his house, but men are freer outside. Come. The cold evening air bites at my skin as we walk away from Meduseld. At last we stand in a dimly lit clearing, far from all others. Helm's voice cuts through the cold. You do not seek an alliance, Freca. You seek a throne. My blood boils with rage. How dare he, after all my work, all my strength, to stand here accused like a common thief? Old kings that refuse a proffered staff may fall on their knees, I snarl, stepping closer, my voice trembling with fury. The heat of his gaze meets mine, and I know he will never respect me, never see me as equal. The tension snaps, and my fist finds his face, then his gut, but Helm does not flinch. He stands like a mountain, unmoved by my rage, and I suddenly feel smaller beneath his unyielding stare. I may have made a mistake. The fall of Freca. The world spins, and I feel the cold bite of the ground as my head strikes something hard. A rock, sharp and unyielding. My vision blurs, smearing torchlight and shadows into a single dizzying haze. The roar of voices around me becomes a distant, muffled clamor, drowned beneath the ringing in my ears. Warmth spreads across my face, and I know it for what it is. Blood. My blood. Suddenly, strong hands lift me, cradling me close. I hear my name, desperate and broken. Father! Wulf's voice carries above the noise, a cry torn from his very soul. My son's arms hold me tight, his chest heaving with grief. I struggle to open my eyes to see him. There he is, Wulf, my only son. The fire in his eyes burns brighter than ever, and I feel pride even now. My lips move as I use the last of my energy to speak to him. The words faint before all falls into darkest night. Leave, Wulf. Go. Be safe. And I have died as Freca. I am killed by King Helm. Continue as Lord Wulf, who has pneumonia. A son's vow as the light fades from my father's eyes. His frame grows heavy in my arms, the spirit that made him strong slipping away, leaving only a broken shell. A howl rises in my chest, raw and unbidden. You will pay for this, Helm. I swear it. I will kill you for what you've done. My voice shakes with fury, grief ripping through me like a blade. Helm stands above me, a mountain of stone, his face cold and unyielding. You speak of treason, Wulf. For this I banish you. Leave Rohan at once, and never return. I stare up at him, hatred burning in my heart. As tears and blood streak my face, he turns without another word, his men following like shadows, disappearing into the Golden Hall. The doors close, and I am left alone with my father and his men in the rain. I rise slowly, my voice hoarse but steady. Those who remain loyal to my father, gather what you can. We make for Dunland to seek refuge with my uncle Careth. This will not be the last time we set foot in Edoras. I swear, Helm, one day you will fall, and I will see it done. King Helm becomes my nemesis. He gets the marks of the West March where we lived, and I get a press claim on the Kingdom of the Riddermark. And that is the basic end of this part, and he travels to his new home in Dunland. A week has passed since my father's blood stained the earth of Meduseld. We fled swiftly from Rohan, my mother, my father's loyal companion Targ, and I finding refuge in the halls of my uncle, Petty King Careth of Dunferin. Careth has welcomed us with open arms, his hospitality warm as the fires that burn in his great hall. Careth mourned with me, sharing in my grief, but his words carry weight. Rohan took much from us. Now is the time to reclaim what is ours. He has given me refuge here in Dunland, a modest hold from which to gather my strength, yet the whispers from Rohan sting like salt in the wound. Hammerhand they call him now. The fools look up to him with awe. My fists clench as the fire in my heart burns hotter. I see the day when their whispers turn to silence, and Helm Hammerhand falls from his throne. Let the Riddermark tremble. I will not rest until it is mine. And from this point, you have a bunch of decisions that you can do. A firm descent from Freyawind is like the biggest one, but basically he has to strengthen his position, secure an alliance, hold out for Hera. Like, there's a bunch of things that you can do. Hera being the daughter. You can also secure alliances with these different people and also seek to strengthen your position. And there's just a bunch of different unique story decisions that you can do. Secure an alliance or an allegiance of Marshal Thorn, which are a bunch of different processes that basically would allow you to have a better chance of fighting against the Riddermark when that time comes. It's a really long story arc, and it is kind of tough. Also, Wulf having pneumonia in this would probably be a reason for me to consider restarting, but that kind of gives you a sense of like what a story in this looks like. They're very well written, they're very well considered, they're a lot of fun, and they might not always be, like accurate. Like, obviously, if I win as Wulf and I become the king, obviously that wouldn't be like what happens in the lore, but you don't necessarily have to play that way. It's a mod, it's a game, you can do whatever you want. I do recommend, if you are curious, trying to play the tutorial for Ireland or something in the base game and then trying this out. There's also artifact crafting, and there's also mining. There's a bunch of different activities that are in the game. I'm switching to a different character real quick, and you're never gonna guess who the Necromancer is. I think that this is one of the best Lord of the Rings games, even if it is a mod, period. There's so much that you can do, so much that you can experience, and so much love that has been taken and care put into the story. I really like this bookmark for different aspects other than the main one. Obviously, you don't have to worry about Mordor as much, and you can play as the Necromancer, which is kind of cool. And there's like a couple different options, and you can reveal yourself, which is cool once you gain a little more power. There's also Umbar down here and their story of breaking away from Harwan, which is really fun. There's Bountig, who is the Uniter, the first Golden King or Golden Emperor, Dragon Emperor, I can't remember what it's called of this area, or one of the first ones, I think. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a really, really well-made mod, and it's just easy to play. I don't know. You can lose a lot of hours just sort of like messing around and doing whatever. There's also sorcery. If you are playing as an evil character like this, that is something that is interesting that you can mess with. So I've not even touched on everything, but I've touched on the basics that I wanted you to see, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And as always, I am Sol. I hope that you liked the video. If you're interested, give the mod a try. You can download it on Steam and join them on the Discord. They're a really great bunch, and they will happily answer any questions you have. But that's going to be it for me, and I will happily see you in the next one.